Good evening. I wasn't on the cast this evening on the beat with Ari Melber because, well, the story's changed at the last minute. And I would have probably spoken if the indictment had been finished and released, but it probably won't be released until tomorrow. There are a couple of comments I'd like to make. One, of course, is that I won't be able to do a walk and talk tonight because it's already getting dark. And I'm still at my office, as you may be able to see. So, what is the significance of today? The significance of today is this is the fourth indictment that will probably be released tomorrow in the morning, if not later this evening, as the judge is waiting around for directions from the district attorney. And there will be a camera in the courtroom when Trump presents himself and perhaps when the indictment itself is presented. The document during the day that went up on the DA's website and was taken down immediately has been circulated far and wide, and it looks like a fair summary of what the case is going to be. There was the former Attorney General made some remark about it, saying, "Oh, I don't know that it's accurate or what it says or anything." For example, there's a skip in the numbers between the first charge, which appears to be a RICO violation, racketeer influence corrupt organization, and it is a statute that is powerful, and it has more predicate acts that allow it to be invoked than does the federal one. The federal is something like 35 crimes. Don't hold me to it, but I'm pretty sure that's about right. And so if you count the way I do, and they say one next to the RICO violation, and then there are several spaces after that, three, and then you see that the next count is number 5, well, then I figure that there are 4 counts of RICO violations for various predicate acts involving a number of people. Now, we are venturing into an area where we don't know the contents of it, but consider this a cheater to know what to look for when the indictment is released. At one point, there were 20 people that were advised that they could be charged in this case. I would expect that prompted a number of them to decide to cooperate. I'm kind of curious if not only Trump is named, but also, say, a couple of his acolytes like Rudy Giuliani. There is always the question about Meadows, who was the chief of staff for Trump. Will he be named in the indictment, or is he helping people put together the indictment? The prosecutor in the case was recently attacked by Trump on one of his tirades in the early morning hours, and that raises a very interesting question, because he's not only been threatening directly and indirectly the prosecutor in Georgia. Over the weekend, after having been told not to be inflammatory and discuss the case outside the courtroom and to leave the rest of your issues to the internet, but not these in this courtroom, Trump, in the early morning hours of Monday, when I'm speaking to you, and it may be broadcast a little later, he did attack the prosecutor, and he attacked her earlier in the weekend for another case that she had involving one of the grunts in the insurgency of Trump, who was before her, that is Judge Chutkin, for sentencing. And first of all, I don't think that shows bias or anything like that, but he's putting himself in an interesting situation. So it will be important for us to watch if the prosecutor in D.C. responds. How could she respond? She could call him before her, ask him to explain himself in order to show cause. She could set the court date, as she said. She could probably do that on her own, or she could wait until the 28th when she has them in her courtroom. She has a number of powers that allow her to act. Now, going back to Georgia, there are similar statutes for defendants who would hurt a potential witness or to violate certain provisions that ordinarily defendants follow as part of what they're required to do if they want to be released on bail pending a trial or plea or whatever. And in Trump's case, that may raise its ugly head when it comes time to talk about bail. And so the bail question may involve questions about custody, and it often is. And custody is not just will you show up when you're asked and abide by the other laws. It is, will you refrain from threatening other people and trying to try this case out in the public. Now, to give you a good example, if you accuse a judge of being biased, then you make a motion. And I believe that that happened in the DA situation, DA Bragg in Manhattan. And the judge, I think just today, denied the motion that there was any question of bias on the part of the judge. So you get some idea of where we are. In terms of what this means to the nation, this is outstanding. This is what we need. We need people to be brought to account for what they've done wrong. And in this case, the RICO action sounds like several things that we're familiar with. That is the preparations to try to take over the election unlawfully and with fraud so that Trump becomes the president instead of the appropriate president-elect Biden. And I think that it's pretty clear that that is an objective, is what the electors are all about. And so this will probably be from the angle of Georgia. And there was a reporter who was present at one of the meetings when the electors were being chosen, and he was a witness before the grand jury. So you get an idea that electors are involved. We know about the actual acts of Trump trying to lean on the Secretary of State for the state. When the Attorney General testified this evening on Ari's show on MSNBC, he said that there was more than one conversation than the conversation that is very well known and played and replayed. So it's going to be a very hard case for Trump to avoid, and for a fellow who is not going to sit down and try to work out a plea deal. And I'm not saying it's impossible, because I've seen it in cases where it wouldn't happen. My druther is that the man end up convicted, and in many places as possible, particularly in a state where no pardon could eliminate the penalty that might be imposed by a sentencing judge. Same is true in New York by DA Bragg. So those are two places where those crimes, if somehow or other somebody tried to pardon him in the federal government, a president, say one of the Republicans who are running for office, because I don't believe Biden will do it, he would still be exposed in those two state prosecutions if he's convicted. So I think this is all very good. It's very bad for Trump. He can, pretend to be stoical in appearance, but I don't believe that's where he is. And I was kind of astonished that he waited until Monday morning at 1 a.m. to send us a message that he was displeased. He talked about the bias and so forth of Judge Chutkin. Now, Judge Chutkin is no pushover. She has a reputation for being strong and for working hard at cases, and I've appeared before her only in one case, and I found her to be that kind of a judge, and I don't think she's going to take any nonsense, and I think she'll fashion an approach. The approach I've suggested is this guy won't understand anything except custody, and whether it happens in D.C. or Georgia or New York or Florida, I think it is the one thing that can protect us from him, and I think we're at a point where we can't rely on him not to use his passport or his planes or some of the accoutrements of what he claims to be a multi-billion-dollar personal wealth to go someplace else. Would he run? I don't know. I believe he's a coward. I believe bullies are cowards. He's a bully. Another interesting one that I've visited before is the case of Hunter Biden. I think that it's entirely wrong that his defense attorney, Abby Lowell, we both went to Columbia, I know him, and he's a fantastic lawyer, and I had the same reaction before I knew what he was saying, which is that he is challenging the ability of the government to set aside the plea agreement. when you make a plea agreement as the defense attorney, and there are several charges, and you make an agreement in those circumstances, you presume that's it. Those are all the cases that you want. Now, that's not to say you couldn't have a very severe felony as one of the things you agree to. But as best I can see, in all the time that the prosecutor Wise had that case involving Hunter Biden, he couldn't find anything. And as he is a Republican, which by itself doesn't mean so much, but he was appointed by a Republican administration in the Attorney General's office, and plainly they hoped that they would get an angle, a foothold on a way to upset Biden running in 2020. And so now they're trying to do it again. Now, independent of that, the argument that is being made by Abbe Lowell is, A, we made an agreement, stand by it, and there may be problems with that. There may have evolved problems, but I don't think you get to push aside the decisions you made because you, Weiss, are getting political pressure that either now you got to do more or you shouldn't have been appointed because you didn't do enough before. So I see the status of our nation continuing on a vector which is favorable. I would call from the beginning I've called it the restoration of the republic, that we are seeking to restore the republic. Biden did that just by winning the election. That was what he was required to do. Whatever differences each of us have with him politically and so forth, he is the only person, in my opinion, who can command the support that's necessary to succeed himself as the president. And all those people who are bouncing around and talking about other ways and, we're tired of these people. Well, I thought it was unfair when they tried it on Hillary, and I know it's worse than unfair with a candidate like Trump, who's had the opportunity to find where the levers of power are and how to misuse them to his own advantage. And so we cannot have that going on. Now, I could walk you back and forth through my office, but it's not a cathedral of trees. Maybe it's a cathedral of glass and desks and things like that. These are the tools of a lawyer. And when I first became a lawyer, after I got out of Columbia Law School, I thought it was important to become a law clerk, to study the law from that perspective, because I thought I am very upset about official corruption and how our government works and fails to work. And I used to sit with my grandfather watching the talking heads on Sunday, and the two of us would shout at the TV saying, answer the question, and you can fill in asshole or whatever you think we might have said. My grandfather was very careful because we started this, I must have been 7 or 8 or 9, I don't know, I was young enough. My dad had no patience for politicians. But from that point forward, I've always asked questions about our public officials. And so I prosecuted official corruption cases, and I ran investigations on the Hill and so forth. So I developed a characteristic that I didn't know when I left law school exactly what I'd do. I just knew I wanted to be in the mix of the passions of the time, and I wanted to be working in matters of truth and justice, and I've managed to have some exciting chapters and hopefully to make a difference along the way. That's what each of us has to do. Whatever we can do right now, if there's a crisis to be addressed, it is first and foremost getting our government to work, because all the other things flow from it. We don't have a representative government. We don't have public works. We don't have a program to take care of the aged and the saged. We don't have a program to give and respect the rights that women have earned and should continue to have. We don't have the equal justice before law, that persons of color and differences of every imaginable way should be treated all the same. So we could go on. You know it as well as I do, and each of us have to do what we can do. So when will I be on Ari, rather? I don't know. I mean, it's up to the show. And I did stand by in case something broke during the show, and that's a pleasure for me because I like the way Ari does his business. and I like his guests and so forth. And I did once tell him, he asked me about doing the show, and I said, and not just as a guest, did I think it was easy what he did? And I said, I couldn't do interviews the way you do them with some of these people. I said I'd be a lot more, I guess, brash would be a polite way to put it. So, have faith. We're on the path. We just have to help everybody continue to get there. Most of us do it by conversation at the water cooler or at some social or something, which doesn't turn into a screaming match with an undisclosed MAGA nut. And so that's what we can do. If you can give a couple of bucks to a candidate, if you can walk a neighborhood and you're not concerned about COVID, do these things and keep apprised of what the facts are that we get from the most reliable of reporters, and know those who are not reliable at all. So, thank you. We're doing good business, and we just keep on the path. So, confusion to our enemies until the next time when I am surrounded by trees. Bye-bye.